on all of your drawings you should have a title block. This basically gives the reader an understanding of the information they have here. Who drew it, what scale it's at, project name, so on. Anyway, let's go through it. So distinguish it from the drawing somehow with an outline, as I'm doing here. You know, you can make the title block your own. I'm just going to take you through the basics. So this here will have a name. This is your name. Then you'll have the project name. So here it is. Paddington. Reservoir. Then over here you'll have a drawing number. So that might be drawing 1 to 10. We're basically in sketch design now, so you may have a subtitle to that, like SK01, for example. Then in these smaller boxes, you'll have date, drawing, number, and scale. And then up here, you'll have what the drawing is. So this is, so we'll call this lower ground plan. And the date is 17th of the 8th, 18, drawn by me, so I'll initial that there. Scale is 1 to 100, and the job number, let's call it 205. So the other thing to have on your title block is a scale bar and your north point. So a scale bar is achieved by creating something that, if someone was to take this drawing and it had been copied a few times and so the scale was a little bit out, they're not relying on a scale ruler if something's not dimensioned. Basically what they can do is they can take their ruler and they can say, oh, okay, so this is 1 to 100. So that, and you're giving them what this means. So this is 1 metre at 1 to 100. So that's 2 metres, 3 metres, 4 metres, and then right at the end here is 8 metres, and that's 0 that it starts at. So it doesn't matter if it's warped slightly. They can come here and they can measure that, and then they can take that measurement throughout the drawing and know that they have an accurate measurement. So the other thing to have is your north point. So the Paddington Reservoir is almost due north, slightly to the east. And that is your title block. Now we can start drawing up the plan from our notes that we took on the site analysis. So the best way to start with that is with quite a fine pen. So you get all of the line work in, and then you can come back and start popping the appropriate lines with a heavier weight. So the nice thing about hand drawing is it gives your drawings a bit more life. And especially when you're looking at something like the Paddington Reservoir, where everything, it's a bit of ruins and it's greenery. So this is just a really nice way to express it. So now that we've predominantly inked in the plan, it's good to look at how this was originally a gridded plan, and architects Tonkin, Greer, Zulaka took it and took out some of those columns. So if you remember when we were on site and we were measuring them, I was saying it's quite an easy site in one way because it is gridded. So you can measure between the columns and then you can measure the distance between the columns in both ways, and that kind of sets you up. So we measured in between the brick columns and they were 1600. So we're drawing here at a scale of 1 to 100, which means that 1 centimetre is 1 metre. So if we apply it here, we see that we've got 1600 between our brick columns. The nice thing that the architects did was to decide which columns remain and which should be removed. By doing this, by removing some, they've made these congregation spaces. So in this second row here, they've removed all the ones here. So the brick ones are consistent the whole way along. And then, so we've got 1, 2, 3, and this is our 4th row here. And once again, they've removed the ones through the lawn. So you're getting these 2 congregation spaces. And then you've got the final row of columns at the back here. You also have the archways that are higher to the western wall, but they also line up. So that's talking back to that gridded pattern. So we will apply some heavier line weight to areas to delineate things such as where you might be cutting through something, or if you just need to pull something up off the plan. In this case, we'll probably only apply it to the things that you're cutting through, because we are going to colour this plan up, which will help all the other things pop. Also, just a note about stairs. You show the direction that they're going up. And then these little ones here. So, thicker pen. So all of these columns we're cutting through. And you may have noticed also that I've got some of these dashed lines on here. So they represent the elements above, such as the catwalk and the platforms, and also the overhead gardens that sit on the vaulted sections of the ceiling. And the nice thing about using a fine pen to do your outlines first is when you go back and you're using the fatter pen, you don't have to go to the edges again. So you always cross a line when you're doing an architectural drawing. If you leave it open, it's not a wall anymore. So it's nice to come in and then use a darker pen, but you don't have to go, you just go to the tip of that now because you've already crossed that line. So you've already shown that that is a wall here, but you're just giving it prominence now. And in a way, that back line is darker, but this one, if you remember, and I don't think I've got a photograph with me here, but it's a bit lower in these archways, so that isn't a dark line. So really within this plan, we've got the outer walls and the columns. So something like the railing you may give a double line to, so that goes all along here. Basically goes to the perimeter of the new elevated plane to what's below, which is the original base of the reservoir. So you're popping this in a different way. So the other thing that you'll do, the plan, is now that you've got all the architectural elements in there, is you can start making it look pretty by putting some greenery in there. So this is a big planter box, if you remember. So I'm just doing some fluff plants in there, and then all of this section here. And they can be as fun and scribbly as you like. Also something like the grass. So already you can see that by adding this additional layer, you're creating a graphic story. Now that we've established the lower ground plan, we can take a piece of trace and start looking at the street level. So if you recall, we dashed these lines in previously which showed the structure above. So let's start with those. This is one of the garden beds on the vaulted ceiling, as is this. And this is the catwalk. So you still have the stair coming up here. And the lift popping up. We've got a viewing platform here. And so once again, all of these will have that railing around them, so you can give them a secondary line. Now, if you wanted to, you could draw some of the items or the plan, the objects below in a faint outline, which would give this plan a more graphic nature, and then pop everything that's above. So this is a large garden bed. So the difference with this wall now is these are these upper archways, and so that line actually comes in here now, but these outer lines remain the same. Ensuring that you keep the openings clear. It's pretty basic, the street level plan, compared to the lower ground plan, as you can see. And within this, we are only cutting through such elements as these structures, which are holding up that lightweight aluminium decorative vaulted ceiling above the catwalk, and perhaps some of these lift walls. And once again, well, you can give these a bit of a border. And then decorate them with some greenery. But it's really lovely to see the top plan on top of, and get that kind of layering of all these platforms together. Because it's such a powerful composition when you're in the park. A solid fence along here. And that's Oxford Street. So we discussed a little bit the sense of light in here, and that it faced almost due north. But let's have a look at how the sun travels. Just a few more trees. My poor pen's getting tired. Give it a break. So, if this is north, and this is east, and this is west, this is the way the sun. That's better. So that's in the southern hemisphere. So if you're in the northern hemisphere, the sun, although it tracks the same east to west, will be tracking on the southern side instead of the northern side. So the other thing that we'll look at within here is the way that sound moves in here. So say people are speaking here, the sound moves over to the walls and then bounces back out. Now, because there's all this openness above, it has somewhere to go, but you'll still notice with big groups that it does reverberate around the space. And as I mentioned before, it's the same with a breeze. So if you've got a breeze coming in from the northeast, it comes down over the wall here, but once it's in here, it kind of just navigates itself around the park. And you'll feel it when you're in there, that it feels like it just kind of circulates, but in a really lovely soft way. It's very protected. So it's quite a tidy plan, the Paddington Reservoir, as I discussed before, with the gridding system, and then you've got the formats of the pavers and the stairs. But the one thing that I feel is historically out of context is the lawn. This, amongst the pool, which is a reference to its former use, and the columns, of course, which were integral to its design and purpose. The grass is a folly, but soft and soft underfoot, and the only material in this otherwise rigid skeleton that gives you that sense of softness that you want in a park. So if it wasn't there, you could imagine that it would have quite a sombre feel to it. That's the other thing that you'll notice is this kind of multiple entryways. So you've got 1, 2, 3, and basically the catwalk. Now, if you only had one point of entry and exit, this park would feel very contained and not very inviting. So you almost need those for this feeling of movement and flow, and you can come in one way and exit the other. So also what these overhead elements do is they create pockets of shade over the top. So let's look at it this way. So when you get this lovely sun coming through, that comes through all day because you've got this northern aspect, is the vertical elements kind of dance across the walls and onto the floor, all of these railings and of course the columns, whereas the catwalk and the overhead gardens almost create these ephemeral rooms of shadow. So instead of kind of giving them a line, you might just want to give them some darker kind of shading over the grey pavings. And because they're quite boxy, they do create these rooms as they move. So purposely take them outside of the line so that they're not all back from the line. So they're not kind of in relation to the architectural